I call Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow Mr Bishop on the sale and supply of alcohol, display of low alcohol beverages and other remedial matters amendment bill. I do remember 2012 when the principal bill came through this House, and it was a conscience issue for members in the Labor Party, and there was a rather large spreadsheet to make sure that our whips knew which way we were to vote. But in amongst all that, the government's process was so good that it forgot to put this in the bill. So that's why we have to take up the time of this House, a time of a select committee, as Jacinda Ardern has said, a very robust process, to fix up what I think the Minister called an oversight in this minor and technical bill. It used to be Simon Bridges used to provide the House with his fix-up bills, but this is another piece that we've got before us. And if people are watching, yes, we are debating where we put low alcohol and non-alcohol beer in a supermarket. That's what this piece of legislation does. Because if you are watching and you're wondering why we're talking about this, back in 2012 when this House passed this piece of legislation, there was an oversight, and low alcohol beer and low alcohol drinks and no alcohol drinks were excluded from the special area that you see in the supermarket. So if you go to the supermarket now and you look at the options around your normal wine and beer, you won't see low alcohol beer, you won't see no alcohol beer, because the law forbids them to be placed with those products. It is a minor and technical bill, but for many reasons we think it is an important one. So we are going to be supporting it on this side of the House, in the Labor Party anyway. But there are two perspectives around this bill that I will talk about in my contribution. First one is the simple one and deals with the mechanics of the bill. From a customer's point of view, I think Mr Bishop mentioned it in his speech, you don't want to go looking around the supermarket for your low or no alcohol option. But that is the reality at the moment. If you're the retailer, you also don't want to put a product that should naturally be with a family of products, which is wine and alcohol, wine and beer, with fizzy drinks and other juices. Now, from a producer's point of view, and I know that the Brewers Association, or at least the Brewers Guild, have been concerned about this, they don't want some of their products that they've been creating because of the new regime around drink driving, that is low alcohol or no alcohol, to be placed with other juices and other drinks too. They want to make sure that those options are right next to the normal alcohol products that we see in the supermarket. But also from a public health perspective, Mr Speaker, I think we also want these products to be with their family of products. So you want the low alcohol beer to be with the full strength alcohol beer. So if you're going home on a Friday night, like Mr Bishop does for his fish and chips, you can say, I don't want the Stone Lager Pure, I will take the low alcohol option. That is the option that Mr Bishop is faced with on a Friday night. And I think that is the best way for us to approach it, to give consumers options about another choice in terms of the alcohol. So in that respect, in the functional respect of this piece of legislation, we think that's a good thing. It does give people a lower grade option when they want to drink and want to socialise and have a beer, or have a beer and have no alcohol. That's a good thing. The other perspective I'd like to look at is one that Jacinda Ardern also looked at, and that is how this bill has come about. I think this bill was introduced on the 7th of December, and quite lightning speed gets its first reading in the House. And I think that speaks to the priorities of the government. There are many other things that we think on this side of the House the government could prioritise. You could prioritise maybe the 6-year-long wait that we've had for the Radio New Zealand bill to pass through this House, 6 years. We could prioritise safer houses, warmer houses, a whole lot of other things in the health area and education, which we think that you should get in there fast and get them done. But what is getting done fast here? Getting a beer. Having a beer, and you've got to wonder where the priorities of this government are when they make things happen fast, and it's the ability to buy a beer down at the supermarket. Now, mechanically, I have no problem with it because I don't think it's such a big issue. But I think when you look at it in terms of priorities of the government, Mr Speaker, I think there are some genuine questions that can be asked from voters out there to say, is this as much as a priority as other things that could be put on the agenda? And I think that, there are genuinely other things, Mr. Speaker, that are of a higher priority than low alcohol and no alcohol beers at the supermarket. One of the other aspects of this, and it is a minor and technical bill, Mr. Speaker, is that it gives a company the ability to hold a licence. And I think one of the issues that you can have with that is that if someone is to hold a function, it had to be an individual that held the liquor licence for that. A company couldn't do that. And I think, if you were to be the individual within a company that had to get the licence and something went wrong, it was the individual that was up for any penalty if the liquor licence wasn't adhered to. So this piece of legislation does tweak the principal bill and allows a company to be a licensee in a sense, which I think is a good thing for the protection of people who are working for those companies. But in general, going back to the mechanics of the bill, it does get rid of a piece of red tape, which I think was an oversight back in 2012. As I say, it was a time when there were lots of options, Mr. Speaker, on the table in terms of what could be ruled in and what could be ruled out of the sale and supply of alcohol legislation at the time, and this one got left out. I don't know how it happened. The government was in charge of the process at the time, so maybe someone from that side of the House could explain to us how that happened. But I don't think it is the best use of this House's time to be arguing or debating over this. And there was an argument put forward by my colleague Jacinda Ardern about whether this could have been contained within a statutes amendment bill. And then Mr Bishop rebutted her comments, saying that we didn't know whether or not that this whole House could have agreed to this. But we could have saved at least 4.5 hours in this place in a select committee process if the government had come to other parties and said, could we do it in a different way? Could we do this in a statutes amendment bill? And I think that would have been a much tidier process, a much more efficient process, and allowed other priorities of the day, Mr Speaker, to be put through this House rather than this piece of legislation which is before us right now. A couple of people on this side of the House have asked about something a little bit quirky in this bill, and that is mead. That's right. Because so let me talk a little bit about mead. There is a meadery, not in my electorate, Mr Speaker, but in the electorate of Rongotai, in Houghton Bay, I believe. And if you don't know what mead is, it's a honey-based alcohol. I'm a whiskey person myself. Someone over across the hall will know that. But mead is not necessarily my job. But if you are a big fan of mead, and I know there are some fans of mead out there, this piece of legislation also covers mead. Right. So if you're one of the very small percentage of New Zealanders, Mr Speaker, who I believe would enjoy a good drop of mead, I think Mr Mitchell would. He looks like a honey man to me. Then this piece of legislation also covers mead. So don't worry, the government has taken care of the mead fans as well in this piece of legislation. I don't think that's looking after the mead fans in this country is a massive priority, but hey, that's what the government has decided to do. There are other things other than mead that this House could be talking about. So maybe in the future the government would like to take a different approach to these kinds of bills and try and look for a statutes amendment bill, another way to progress this through, other than wasting the time of this House on an oversight that it made when it passed this principal legislation.
Mr Speaker.
Alfred.